and welcome to the latest video in our GAA Handball Youth Expo series. Delighted to say we've a stellar lineup today of international stars, some of the top players from various countries. So want to give a big welcome to Luke Thompson from Britain, to Daniel Cordova, we'll say United States, Daniel, but we might get to that later on, and from Catriona Crazy from the Republic of Cork. So thanks very much to all three of you for joining us here. The theme of our chat, which is going to take about half an hour, is handball Globetrotters. So we're going to look at your international travel and indeed your local travel within your own countries. Talk about the various experiences that you had and how would you sell this to young people. So we're going to start off just to break the ice with a very easy question, because we're aiming at young people here during lockdown. Handball players, they're sitting around and they're probably starved of handball content. So maybe I'll just start off with you, Luke. If I gave you 90 seconds to sell the sport of handball to a young person thinking of starting it, what would you say to me?
Oh, 90 seconds. That's a tough one. I would say handball has got everything you need as a young person looking to engage with sport in general, really, to build the key skills that you need to be able to take up any other sport and obviously continue your handball journey. It's a super fun, really exciting, pretty raw sport that's all very action packed, and it's just a super fun way to meet new people, meet new friends, and quite quickly get on the sort of handball circuits. As you can see here, you've got players from all around the world that you can meet and you can integrate with, and you can explore new places through a really fun sport.
Okay, that was pretty good. That was about 80 seconds. Same question to you, Daniel, now in 90 seconds. How would you sell handball to a young person thinking about starting our sport?
I'd say, it's a challenging sport, and I think that's what I liked from it. It requires you to use, like your left hand or your offhand, which is something that I didn't experience in any other sport. It also allows you to travel. I mean, traveling is for me the best way to improve. So for someone who's trying to improve and who's just getting into handball, you want to travel. If you're in Ireland, I feel like it's a little easier than sometimes you're in the US. But, I've had a bunch of really cool experiences through handball, through traveling, through meeting a bunch of new people, a bunch of new friends. And I don't know. I think that's what I would say.
That pretty sums it up. And Catriona, same to yourself. You've had a chance to think about that one now, so you've had
I actually didn't. I was trying to listen. But I think they covered a lot there. But it's a very fast paced, it's mentally and physically challenging. So obviously you have the individual element of singles, but also doubles as well. So you have that team element, and you just no matter where you go in the country, or when I travel over to the States, you're going to have people that you have a lot in common with. So you have friends ready-made all over the world. So definitely the opportunities to travel are massive, and I think quite unique to our sport as well. It just develops all your skills, and everyone should play it.
I'm going to stay with you, Catriona, for the next question. So I'm interested to know how all three of you first got into the game of handball before we go on and talk about your globetrotting exploit. So, Catriona, I would guess that you followed the well-worn path of being introduced to the game by family members. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So my brother John started playing. He's about 2 years older than me. But really, where we're from in Ballydesmond, most children that go to primary school there would give handball a try at some point. There's a very active club, and obviously we would have all heard of 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and his success nationally and internationally. So he was a big inspiration for us all. But I was always very interested in sport, and I played football as well up until a few years ago. But handball stole my heart.
Daniel, I was looking at your bio on the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 website, and your hometown, I think, is listed as far as El Paso, and of course you went to college in Lake Forest. So maybe you tell us a little bit about your experiences there growing up. Obviously, I'm presuming your family moved from Juarez to El Paso, and then we're going on to Lake Forest up in the Chicago area.
Yeah, it was kind of I still have a bunch of my family in Juarez, so it's a border town, so it's really easy to get back and forth. Yesterday I was in Juarez, and today I'm in El Paso. It's only a 30-minute drive, not including the time that you take at the border for questions and stuff. But yeah, I started playing in 𝗏𝗏, and that's where I grew up. And then my parents got divorced. My mom went to El Paso, and my dad stayed in 𝗏𝗏. So I was always split. And then I always played in 𝗏𝗏. There wasn't really a big community of handballers in El Paso, Texas. But as time went on, they started to grow the sport, and we would start to play over here a little bit more often. And then when I got to college, I really had no idea that there was a collegiate program. I know I had heard my brother had gone to one collegiates, and I was like, cool, I'd like to go. So I was in the University of Texas at El Paso, and I went to the collegiate tournament, having no clue what to expect. When I got there and seeing, full teams of 24 players and coaches and I was just not expecting that. For me, that was really cool. And then from there, I did well, and I ended up going to Lake Forest, which I had a lot of fun, going there, and learned a lot from, Coach Mike Dow and all the teammates.
Yeah, we'll come back and talk about the handball scene in Mexico, because I'm interested to talk about that. But Luke, how did you get interested in the game? I know your primary focus is wall ball over in the UK, but how did you first get introduced, and how have you made it to this point in your career?
So over in England, there's a quite traditional old sport called 𝗏𝗏s, which is played in a lot of the private schools. So that was my initial start into any handball type sport. It's very similar to full handball in many ways. So it's got your four walls. It's got a bar like squash that you have to keep the ball up above. So it's a little bit different in that sense, but it's got the same principles. You have to use both hands, etc. So I did that as a school kid and was relatively successful. I got seen at one of the national tournaments by somebody from UK Wallball, who asked me to go and try one wall, and I converted from there basically. So I picked it up about the age of 17 really, but having converted from a very similar sport, and just kind of went from it really. So that was my way in.
And what is the five scene like there? Because I've kind of kept one eye on it. I sometimes look it up on social media and stuff, because I know, like, obviously we've all heard of Eton Fives and Rugby and Winchester and places like that. What is the five scene like? I've seen the gameplay and it looks very interesting.
Yeah, it's a really fun sport. I mean, the rallies go on forever, so it's totally different in that sense. Like, it's hugely about stamina and building pressure rather than being able to find quick winners. But the scene's really, really fun. I mean, get a lot of people from all around the country that play. It is a relatively small sport, Rugby Fives. Eton Fives has kind of got its own totally separate community, so even though they're called similar things, the sports are actually very different. But again, they're kind of all sort of similar premises. So, it's pretty fun. Okay.
And so to stick with you, Luke, then, as you advanced and started to become more proficient at wall ball, then, and you moved on to the European Wall Ball Tour and enjoyed tremendous success. So maybe for people who aren't familiar with the European Wall Ball Tour, because I think it's something we haven't embraced as much in Ireland as we probably should have, considering that we have a lot of one ball tournaments within the country. But for people who aren't fully familiar with that, will you describe how it works and where the various stops are on that tour?
Yeah, of course. So the European Tour is relatively new, I guess. Probably the last 5-6 years it started to really formalise its offer. But before that was kind of like one-off tournaments in different places around Europe that have sort of amalgamated together into a tour. So last year, for example, there were 4 big events pre the lockdown. So we had one out in Spain, out in Valencia. We had one in Belgium, just outside Brussels. There was one over in Holland, about an hour and a half north of Amsterdam, and then there's one in England, over in London. So there were 4 there, but we've also been out to France and Italy in the past. I mean, there's aspirations to make it much bigger and go further afield. But effectively, the tour is set up to enable people of all levels to come and play. So if you're a beginner and you want experience of travel, like Daniel talked about, that being one of the best bits for him. I mean, if you're a beginner, you can still come and compete in some of the beginner grades. If you want to compete in the men's or the women's or the over 40s and kind of the top categories, then of course come and do that as well. But they're really competitive. They are amazing fun. Social community aspects of them are great. So you make loads of friends from all over the place, which is brilliant. But yeah, I mean, I would thoroughly recommend it. There are some really good Irish players on the tour already. Many of them whom you'll know, Conor McElduff and Terry McElvenney, James Prentice. I mean, there's loads of them. And on the women's side as well, we know how many good Irish women there are out there. It would be great for someone to get involved. They'd really enjoy it, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the standard is phenomenal, because I think maybe in Ireland we might have been guilty in the past of sort of thinking maybe a bit of snobbery to it, and thinking that we started the game in Europe or something like that. But I remember at the 2012 Worlds, like actually I played in and lost to a couple of Belgian guys in the doubles, and we played a couple of guys from Holland, and the standard is really strong on mainland Europe, isn't it?
It is, for sure, and I think one of the beautiful things about it is so a lot of the English players come from a fives background, but there are all sorts of different hand-based sports all around Europe. So in Spain, there's things like pelota. In Belgium, you've got things like 𝗟𝗪𝗲𝗄. In Holland, you've got something called 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗏, and they're all slightly different variations on hand sports games. So you have these amazing athletes that some of them are professionals in their major sport out in their country, who over time have gradually converted towards wall and now come and play on the tour. So you get all this huge variety of styles that comes from where their sort of predominant skills have grown as a basis. And it kind of merges into this ultimate sort of universal sport that one will kind of offers us. And it's fantastic. And as I say, the level is really strong. We're now getting some of the good players from the US coming over, and they certainly don't always win. So it's good.
Catriona, just talk maybe about your experiences as a juvenile player travelling overseas with Ireland. I know you would have played on Irish squads that went at Christmas to USHA Junior Nationals and so on. So what are your early experiences of going to those events?
That was the beginning of it for me, really. So I started playing handball when I was 8, and then I went on my first trip to the US Junior Nationals when I was 14. So they were on in Tucson, Arizona. So I remember hearing about the trials not long before they actually happened, and couldn't believe that, if I win this tournament, I'll actually get to go to America. It came as a surprise to me, to be honest, that I won that year. I suppose, it was for a 15 and under, so I didn't really know what to expect, and there was a high standard, but luckily I did anyway. So 𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗋 was actually our team manager that year, which was massive, because I probably hadn't really spoken much to him before, but he kind of took me under his wing a bit after that. He'd always be checking in over the years to see how I was getting on with training and everything. And I remember having training sessions up in 𝗚𝗚 and doing circuits and all, and that was a big shock to the system as well. But it was a great introduction, really, to how the top players prepare, and then it was a massive experience. So I had 5 years of that, then 5 Christmases in a row over in the US. So as part of the Irish team, my father would have travelled with me the first 2 years, but then he kind of let me off. So there was a great setup anyway, and plenty of adults with us. So it's mad the bond you actually have with the players, not just on the Irish team, but others that travelled over as well. You'd still think back to Chicago in 2009 or whatever, you'd have great memories of them. But that was great introduction to me, because then as I kind of progressed to playing in the collegiate tournaments and over to the pro tournaments and the US nationals and stuff like that, I was well experienced at the travel side of it and kind of adapting to using different balls and things like that.
Yeah, because it is different. Obviously, people from a non-handball background watching this video mightn't realise, because it is different, isn't it? Going from an Irish court to an American court, different ball and heat and everything else.
It definitely is. I think it used to be more so. I think the courts here are getting a bit warmer now and stuff. We're getting a bit more modern, but definitely you'd be sweating over there in the warm up, just the heat in the courts, and being part of these massive complexes where obviously we'd be used to one court by the GAA pitch, or we're very lucky in my club to have 2, but 12 courts, it's very different. And then the different ball is probably the main challenge. But, if you can get your hands on one the few weeks before the tournament and practice over here, I suppose. And then you'd be tired from the flights and things like that. So there's a lot to manage, but obviously it's well worth it. So.
Yeah. And Daniel, listen to Catriona there. it's unlikely. Well, maybe I'm saying unlikely, but it's unlikely that Catriona would have spent 5 Christmases in a row in the States as a teenager if she had never played the game of handball. And probably the same with yourself. You might never have visited so many cities around America if you weren't playing the game of handball. So maybe just talk to us about how you first experienced the travel end of handball, traveling all around the United States, getting to see different cities, different cultures of the country. How did you embrace that?
Oh, that's one of my favorite things. You know, growing up, my family, I guess we didn't travel too much. We just were they were local. Maybe we would go someplace that's maybe an hour away from here. Nothing crazy. Not even road trips or stuff like that. So like me getting on flights was definitely new for me. And then, you know, it got to the point where I was getting on flights almost probably every month. I was going to different cities. And at the beginning, my brother and I would just go to the tournaments and just play. And we'd want to watch every single game because, you know, it'd be like, oh, Armando is playing Sean Lenning and we have to watch that. And then Killian is playing this guy. We have to watch that one too. And then as time went on, we started to realize that we're going to these really cool cities and we're just at the gym, which, you know, is a cool experience. But at the same time, we wanted to start doing more stuff in the city that we were in because we're in New York. We're in some places, a bunch of places in California. We're in Houston, just big, cool cities that have a lot of things to do. So as time went on, we started to just kind of sacrifice seeing some good matches and go do things in the city. And I feel like that kind of just changed the whole experience for us. It started to get a lot more fun and we started taking also family members with us. So we can do just other activities and, you know, it's a handball trip, but at the same time, it's you have to take some time to enjoy, because we had been to all these different cities and then people would ask us, oh, what did you do there? And be like, you know, we were at the gym. And then now we can actually say like, oh, we went to go see this and the big tourist things, which I think changed the experience for us and made it way better.
So what was the first tournament you attended outside of your own hometown there in El Paso?
I think the first one was on nationals I feel like Catriona will probably remember better than I would. There was a guy in Phoenix. My dad was going to school in Phoenix and he had a junior program. And that's how we really got into the sport. We played locally and, you know, just messed around a little bit. But once we got into his program, he started taking us to these tournaments. It might have been Portland, might have been national or something like that in 2006 or something like that, okay. I think. And we drove to Portland. It was like a 20-hour drive. It was a decent drive. It was, I think, 3 cars with a bunch of kids. And we really didn't know what to expect. And when we got there and we see this, we're used to local tournaments where, you know, we probably get like 30. Juarez does have a big handball community, but when you get to a tournament where there's that many players, it's kind of surprising. But I think that one must have been my first real big tournament, and we did pretty well. And from then, we really got completely hooked. Yeah,
I can imagine as a kid, you're going back home and you're telling all your friends at school about it. And like as Catriona said, this is something that's sort of unique to handball, that you have these opportunities. If you're playing any other sport, running or basketball or anything like that, you might necessarily get the chance to travel thousands of miles.
No, you probably have to get to a really good level to start traveling so much. But for handball, you could be any level and you can start traveling. And I think that's the best way to improve as well.
Yeah.
Play different people and stuff.
So just again, look, to touch on what we talked about, and I'd like to bring Catriona and Daniel in on this as well. You talked about fives, and I personally am fascinated by this sort of, all these little handball cultures that we have. They're all little sort of handball communities all over the place. Even I was down in Melbourne and there's a handball community there, and we see them popping up everywhere. So you're talking about big ball, tree ball, and the west coast of America. You're talking about all these different types. Do you think are we doing enough as a sport to sort of bring all these different codes? Because they are essentially all handball players, albeit different types of handball. Are we doing enough to bring all these different codes of handball and these communities together?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and one that in the UK we're looking at, because we know that a lot of governing bodies and getting recognition as a governing body, particularly by certain organisations in England, it's better if you sort of group a series of sports together. And actually it's about building those relationships and creating the pathways between sports so that people can go and try new things. And not everything's going to work for every person, but actually you might try handball and then realise you love fives, or you might try fives and then realise you love handball. It's just offering opportunities to people to try lots of different sports. And I think there's something pretty beautiful about this idea that you go to somewhere else and you find this sport that you've never heard of, but actually you have this sort of connecting sport that I think handball can become. It almost becomes this unifier across codes, that people have their own basic sports, or not basic sports, but you know what I mean, have their basic skill set that they get from their sport that they can bring to a handball court. And there's something really, really nice about that. And I think handball's got the kind of accessibility and the potential to be that, offer that amongst all the hand sports out there.
I heard someone make the point once that the Basques are pound for pound the best handball players, that you can take a Basque player and they can slot into different codes. But what do you think? I can see you laughing there, Dan. What do you think, the three of you, from the different players you've seen in different countries and different codes, which are pound for pound the best?
I've seen a bunch of players, because in 𝗏𝗏 they play with a basketball as well, and then they play with a different sponge, like a big sponge ball, and then they play with, it's basically, the other one's like basically a baseball. It's crazy. And then it's two walls, and some people play with, because the city built handball courts, but not necessarily the same handball courts. Every one built a different one, which then it gets kind of crazy because some are really wide, some are really long. But I think from the players that I've seen, and from the players that I've seen adjust to other courts and different kinds of balls, it sounds biased, but I would almost say that the 4-wall handball players, and right now I've been seeing it more because with this quarantine, it kind of forced us to, there's no indoor courts open. So it forced my brother and I to start playing outdoor. You know, we played a lot of outdoor, but we started playing more 3-wall and big ball. And there was a little tournament in 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃, which I think is kind of cool, because normally we wouldn't have done this. We would have just stuck to playing 4-wall, you know, and now we're just meeting a different community with the big ball players, and start realizing that we already kind of know, but so many players all over the place. I mean, there was a big community in 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃, which I never expected, because I don't know. So for me, that was pretty cool. You know, getting pushed into that and realizing that there's a whole community of good players in each city. It's crazy. And I imagine in Europe it's crazy because there's so many different disciplines of handball. So that's cool. Yeah.
Well, Luke, what's your thoughts on that? Because you've probably been exposed to a lot of the different brands of handball in Europe for a start.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the styles are just so different. So, I mean, it's part of being Dutch, I think, but everybody that seems to play is about 6'5". That's just a given. I mean, the Belgians tend to be really good with balls over head height because it suits their sport. The Spanish tend to be really powerful and strong, like all-round athletes type things. I mean, the Basques are the ones that anytime I see them at a tournament just blow my mind. They are just willing to chuck themselves anywhere, like their bodies are like battered and bruised by the end of games, but they are unbelievable athletes that can just, really seem to turn their hand to anything, and they quite quickly become really, really effective, great reaction speed. I mean, I think the sport that they play, and you might know this better than me, but the sport they play is with a crazy hard ball and sort of bare hands. And I mean, how they do that, I don't quite know, but it certainly translates into some pretty impressive wall ball when I get to see it.
Catriona, you've played all codes of handball that I know of. Certainly played 60-30 handball, 40-20. I'm sure you've played a good bit of 1-wall handball as well. So, what's your favourite code? And I also, when you're asking a question, I want to know what's your favourite city that you've been to, because I'd say you've been to most of the handball hotspots in North America anyway.
That's a tough one actually, but I'd love to play on the European tour at some point. Like, it's such an easy flight for us from Ireland, to be somewhere in like 2 hours compared to, flying 11 hours to San Francisco or something. But it's just never worked out for me, logistically yet. But what you were saying about like unifying everyone, I think that would be amazing. Like, I'd love to play in Australia. I'd love to play in Mexico. So, most of my travels have been to the US, and I've been to Canada once as well. But, and I have some experience of a Basque player because myself and Aisling O'Keefe were training in Croke Park, Big Alley. I think this was 2 years ago now. And this man from the Basque wandered in, and he'd asked somebody where the National Handball Centre was or whatever. So he was asking us about it, and he asked like if we minded if he watched us train. So we were like, sure, like if you really want to, but I don't think it'll be that thrilling. But anyway, he sat there and watched us for about an hour, I'd say. And then we were like, do you want to come in and play with us? Oh, for God's sake, like, he was such a natural, and he'd obviously never seen a big alley before, like, but he was well able to attack every ball and everything. But yeah, what is my point here? Oh yeah, and I've also played 3-wall, which I really enjoyed. I wish that was more of a thing over here, because I'd say there are some outdoor alleys. I know there's one in Limerick anyway. So yeah, one of the most unique tournaments I played in was like a crossover tournament in Venice Beach. So it was actually 3-wall small ball, and then you play 3-wall big ball as well. I can't remember if we played, probably no 1-wall in that one, but then you kind of combine your points from the two and basically see who came out on top. But that was really cool and humbling at times. But yeah, I have a few favorites in North America. Like obviously New York is a great one because like Daniel was saying there, like there's loads to go and see in the city. Obviously, I think I've been there maybe 6 times or 7 times, and like I kind of grew to like it more and more each time, because the first time it was a bit daunting, and I was there with 𝗚𝗵𝗻𝗃𝗃𝗃, a good friend of mine, and we got a bit lost, but we found our way around eventually. I also have a real soft spot for Tucson because that was my first trip, and I've been back there many times since. And I think there's just such a great handball community there. They make you feel so welcome. And the weather is just so perfect in the winter time for me. The summer is a bit too hot. Yeah, so they are some of my favorites, definitely. I always love traveling to California, especially like when the US Open used to be on in 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I have some great memories from there as well.
Daniel, I said I was going to ask you about the handball scene in Juarez, and you've touched on it a little bit there, but just to go back on that, because I just find it so fascinating. You mentioned there's a big handball community there, and all the courts are sort of different sizes, but like, are we talking like, would it be one of the biggest handball communities in North America? And like, what is the scene there? Is it all outdoor handball mainly, or is there much 4-wall indoor handball played?
I would say that it's the biggest diverse handball community, because if you go some other places, there's a ton of 2-wall players and stuff, but you know, here you get a good amount of them all. You get a good amount of 2-wall players. Some of them play with the basketball. You get a good amount of the 2-wall players that play with the sponge ball. And then you have a I guess, really big community for small ball 4-wall. I feel like, you know, it competes with any other city in the US, at least because if I think of some of the big cities, I mean, when we have a tournament, we're having one, we probably have, I think, 50 players from all divisions. So it's really cool for people starting up, because you already have someone who you're going to have a battle with, no matter what level you are. And right now we're kind of trying, like you're saying, to combine. It's so hard to combine, I feel like, the different disciplines of handball, but we're doing our best. We have a league, or where, you know, we had a league where we used to have to go play 2-wall, and 2-wall players would have to come play indoor small ball, or sometimes, you know, with their sponge ball. Just kind of trying to mix it up and trying to get everyone involved, because it's not the same, but it's all, you know, real similar. And if you enjoy one, you'll enjoy the other. And sometimes you'll be better in different ones. And I feel like it's really cool, and it's really hard to just get everyone involved, but I feel like we're doing a decent job.
And outside of Juarez, like, is there much handball played elsewhere in Mexico?
Not 4-wall. 4-wall small ball is pretty. I don't know why. You know, I haven't traveled too much in Mexico. I've traveled way more in the U.S. But the places I've been and the things I've heard, there's not really 4-wall small ball players. Everyone out there either plays 1-wall with the just different balls. Sometimes they play with it. A lot of them play with a tennis ball. And then the other one is 2-wall. So, yeah, I feel like 4-wall it doesn't get too far into Mexico. It just kind of makes it into the edge in Juarez.
And are there any like monster players down there that could come up and compete, we'd say, in a 3-wall nationals or something like that, and
yeah, I mean, there was one guy, gosh, I forgot his name, but they call him 𝗟𝗶𝗃, and he beat Timbo in a 1-wall game somewhere in Mexico, and Timbo was playing, you know, that's when he was playing really well. Then he was at a really high level, and you know, it was a tournament, it was fair and everything, and this other guy won, which is insane to me, because, and you know, for me it was crazy, and that's not even the main ball that he plays with. He plays mainly with the tennis ball. So to see that, it's on YouTube if anyone wants to watch that game. It was insane. He was hitting these crazy shots, and Timbo was caught off guard, and he tried to up the intensity, but it was a little bit too late.
Yeah, amazing. That I actually think that's the sort of thing we should be marketing in handball, like this.
Imagine having someone just from a different code come in and play. I mean, it's for me, that's really exciting as well.
I've played against him actually.
Oh, you have?
Right.
Yeah, they call him Matador, I think.
Matador, yeah.
Yeah, and just unbelievable. He's really stocky. He's just so strong. Played against him in the sort of World Championships and doubles, and he had a really good partner as well. So yeah, really? Unbelievable Mexican players that we've seen on the tour.
And where is the handball hotspot in the UK now? Is London the strongest area at the minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still relatively small in the UK. It's all limited to 1-wall bar. I think there's an army base somewhere that's got some 4-wall courts, but it's all 1-wall over in England. It's really London centric at the minute, but it is growing. I mean, we've had, I think in the last week, there's been 3 new schools that have taken it up. So yeah, it's a moving beast, and it's got huge potential. But yeah, very London based at the minute.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys was, and bear in mind that we'll be hoping that a lot of young people will be watching this. All this traveling, it's obviously very costly. Are you players relying on sponsorship to cover this, or prize money, or do you need to dip into your savings to cover your handball travels? Maybe ask you that one first, Catriona.
Yeah, look, it would have depended in the past, like if I was part of an Irish team or something traveling to a tournament, then, you know, very lucky to have your costs covered. Typically I would pay for my own flights now, and the 𝗟𝗶𝗃 are the organisation that run the Pro Tour in the US, and you know, if you're ranked within like the top 8 or maybe the top 4 for some tournaments, your accommodation will be covered and things like that. And I've been very lucky in the last few years to be part of the New York Athletic Club team as well. So they would help out with travel costs. But yeah, like it's definitely worth it.
Especially in Ireland, we've got a tradition of fundraising for these things, especially with GAA clubs and so on. So for any youngsters thinking about going, like, I'm sure the club will get behind the fundraising. Daniel, how does it work for you and for the players in your area?
It's definitely a combination. You know, now that I'm at this level, it's a lot easier for me, and I can you know, get, usually prize money will cover it, or a tournament host will cover it. But when I was growing up, there's always someone who's willing to help out if you reach out. You know, it's tough to, you know, because when I was younger, I didn't want to say anything, and I never wanted to ask anybody. But even like that, you know, some people helped me out, like that junior program in Phoenix. That guy kind of took us under his wing, even though we weren't from Phoenix. And I don't know, I think the handball community is a pretty close community. If you meet someone who's a handball player, you immediately want to help out. So yeah, for junior players that are trying to come up and try to travel to these tournaments, at the beginning, it probably will be something that you're going to have to cover, like entry fees and travel. But as time goes on, a lot of times opportunities will arise.
Okay. And Luke, for yourself traveling around Europe on the European tour, is it costly, or do you have some sort of grant funding or sponsorship for that?
So at the moment, it's all self-funded, as is. I mean, the advantage of it only being sometimes a short distance, like Amsterdam's an hour flight or whatever. I mean, the flights are obviously a lot less expensive than if you're traveling out to the US. But again, like some of the different tournaments, so I was out in Colombia a few years back as part of the World Games, and lots of that is covered for you. You might have to cover small bits of it, but lots of it's included. And in the other bit, we've talked a lot about the people you meet abroad. So in the summer of 2019, I did 3 weeks out in New York as part of a training camp, and you can just stay with people that you meet. So I was staying with a variety of people from the handball scene that I knew, which obviously means you can get some amazing travel out of it, but also it's you can find ways, as the others have suggested, at getting around the cost for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to ask each of you to give us a couple of standout memories you've had from when you've been on your travels playing handball. It might necessarily be something that happened in the court, even though it can be if you want. But I just want to know some cool experiences that you've had when traveling to play the sport. So I'll start with you, Catriona, on that one.
So in 2014, that summer, myself and 𝗚𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗹𝗶 went and coached actually at an all-sports summer camp in the Tucson Racquetball Club. There was racquetball, there was like martial arts, they were doing swimming, soccer, volleyball, everything. And then we were in charge of the handball side of things. So that was really cool. Because we were like introducing the sport to a lot of the other coaches as well. And that was a great experience to live away from home for the summer in a different country, in a much hotter country. And actually while we were there, we traveled a little bit with like the kids that played there as part of like Fred Lewis's program, and they have some great coaches there like 𝗵𝗵𝗻𝗃𝗍. So we drove up with them to Flagstaff, which is not that far away, but a very different climate. So it's funny driving in there. We were nearly driving in convoy, and we saw like all of them ahead of us sticking their arms out the windows and everything, because it was like so much cooler up there. So that was a great experience, and like we would have played in the men's divisions and stuff in the tournament. So I remember Abe, actually, he teaches the kids, like, if they hit a double fault in training, they have to do 5 push-ups. So then he hit a double fault in the actual tournament, and they all started shouting at him that he had to do the 5 push-ups in the middle of a competitive game. But he did them anyway, so fair play. But that was a great time and made a lot of friends there. And every time I go back there now, it really feels like home, really. So yeah,
absolutely. Home away from home. Daniel, what stands out for you?
Oh man, I had a similar thing to Catriona actually. In Mexico. The country club in 𝗵𝗁𝗃 invited us to do a handball. The same thing. It was a camp. It was an all sports camp, and we had the handball section. Me and the friend Ricardo Fernandez. He's from 𝗵𝗁𝗃 as well, and that was really cool. We had a bunch of kids. We had groups of like 25 kids just coming in every half hour. It was throughout, probably half of the day. So it was a lot of kids and all ages, and that was really cool. I was excited, and I think I was out of town the next couple of years, but Ricardo kept on going with the program, and I think he pulled in a good amount of junior players or pulled out of the country club to play in other places. So that was really cool. Sorry for cheating and taking your answer, Catriona. But
it is cool, like introducing the sport to players who would never have experienced it before, and it's just so fun to see how much they actually love it, instantly. So that is.
And you can see right away some of them are really good. We played with the big ball because it's a little easier, but you can tell right away some of these kids were talented, and I wanted to be like, hey, you have to come out and play. I'll take it to a tournament and stuff. It was exciting stuff. And
go ahead.
The other thing that stands out, I guess, is I don't know, my favorite thing. Just one specific memory I can't think of one specific memory, but just the experience of getting to meet all these different people. And now when I travel non-handball related, I know that I have friends in all these different cities and all across, not only the US, but across the world. So I always try to reach out if I'm gonna, because I like going on road trips and just traveling the US. And the last time I was on one, I hit up people in different states and stayed with them and played handball with them, and just good friendships. You get to connect with a lot of people that you wouldn't have before.
You're gonna have to say the Collegiate Saga with Martin, no?
Oh, that was a good one. Yeah, the playing the same person all 4 years since our freshman year was crazy, especially when I didn't know anything about collegiates beforehand, and getting to the finals and playing this Irish kid who I had heard of because we didn't play in the juniors, but I had heard of him. And then all the next 4 years was just a competitive it was something really cool to keep me motivated. Sometimes it's hard to stay motivated, but that when I was training, you know, in college in Lake Forest, and I'd be thinking, man, he's beaten me, you know, once or twice or 3 times. And then to finally get him in our senior year was very satisfying. That was really cool.
There's such like a team element to the collegiates, especially for the US colleges, I feel like. So we just kind of got on board with that then, and we have to be just as loud and be chanting as well for the Irish. Like, but the last year of our collegiates was in Portland, so that was cool. I remember Sienna actually singing 𝗪𝗪 at like one of the tram stops, and everybody like loving it. I remember that. I also remember a group of us getting on the wrong tram to go. we got on the right tram, but the wrong direction, and we were just like, don't tell 𝗏𝗏𝗏 about this, because he was like the Irish coach that year. And then we finally got to the facility. I was like minutes before my match, and we walked in and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 was there, and we were like, oops, rookie error.
Yeah, the collegiates is a different experience, because I'm used to just my dad and my brother being the ones cheering me on, and there you have 20-something players plus, you know, since it was US versus Ireland, that was even crazier, because all the schools in the US were cheering. Most of them were cheering for me, and some were cheering for you know, the Irish. So it's a whole different experience, which was really cool.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you about the collegiates. Like, I played in it a few times as well, and I always think it's probably my favourite memory from playing handball as well, because, you know, it just brings in everyone from all different abilities. Like, you know, you've got beginners. You know, young people watching this might be thinking of taking up handball, or have recently taken up handball, and they mightn't realise that even if you're a beginner, if you get on board and you work hard and train and just commit to the team, you don't have to be a brilliant player, but you can actually travel from Ireland out with a squad of athletes to compete in an international competition like this. Like, it really is an opportunity that you don't get in any other sport.
And find someone that's your level as well, because I saw some of my favorite games were the C division drop down, 2 players that, you know, are just beginners, but they bumped into someone who's exactly their level, and it'd be just these crazy tiebreaker games that for me was really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even more common, I think, in the US for players to take up handball in college, and like, it just goes to show it's not too late, because some of them go on to compete like in the pro tournaments regularly. So, you know, if you kind of have a background in sport in general, and then like you're willing to learn and put in some time on the court, like, it is definitely possible.
Yeah, I think 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 took the game up in college and ended up winning the open singles at the collegiates.
Wow.
Oh, did he?
Senior year, I think so. He was on a soccer scholarship, so it shows it's something like that. So it shows it could be done. But Luke, to bring you back in, where we started before we went on that little ramble there was talking about favourite memories that you've experienced while travelling, playing handball. So around Europe, you must have some pretty cool experiences on some of those places that you've been to.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I've got my go-to story when anyone asks me for a cool story that I'll come to in a second. But I had a trip last December, actually, or just the one before COVID, where we took out a GB Junior team actually to the European Junior Championship. So for any of the young people watching, there is a international tournament that's set up for young people to come and play. Again, we took a team of English youngsters that had hardly played before, and they went out. Most of them had got some sort of sporting background, but not necessarily a hand sport at all. And we took them out there as their first experience, really, of handball, and they absolutely loved it, as I'm sure you can imagine. And again, you're meeting friends with people that you can't even speak the same language as you, and you're trying to communicate with them on court, and it's just a really fun experience, and they totally loved it. And since then, they've just not wanted to stop playing. So it was really bad timing when this lockdown kicked in, but they'll definitely pick it up afterwards. Yeah. And then my best travel story, which is going to live with me for a long time. So back in 2013, we had the World Games, which was out in Colombia. So the World Games is like the Olympics for all the sports not in the Olympics. So you've got like squash in there, golf was in there at the time, and one more handball got a spot as like a demonstration sport out there. So we went out to Colombia. We got put into this sort of small town outside of Cali, where the kind of main event was being held. And because it was quite a small town, it wasn't very diverse. So it had got obviously a lot of Latin American Colombians in it, but they'd never seen like a white person before. So you've got this like totally strange experience where we were playing with some of the top players in the world. You had like Timbo there, Taiwan was there representing the US. You've got like some of the top players like Herman Mendez representing Colombia, Puerto Rico, like huge handball nations. And you had this like, we had an opening ceremony with about 2,000 people, and they were only interested in us because we were white. And so you'd got this like amazing experience where generally we were like locked into the handball courts because there were about 500 people outside, like chanting for the English team to come out of the course. So we were nowhere near as good as the Americans, of course, at that time. And ended up, I had to be sneaked out through a tinted windowed 4x4 by the police while they created a diversion to pretend I was going out another door so that we could get out. And we were supposed to be going for dinner at the mayor's house that day, and we turned up 40 minutes late because we couldn't get out of the court. So that was amazing. But where are you going to get those sort of experiences outside of like an amazing sport like this where you can go and try?
Absolutely. There's so much more that we can talk about here. I suppose I'd like to do a quick poll to see between you three guys and maybe myself as well. Not that I'm as well travelled as you are, but how many different countries have been covered that you've gone and played in a handball competition? Now, I've played in Australia, which I don't know if you guys have. So that's one that we can add to the list. But between the other three of you, I'm sure you've covered a lot of countries.
The main ones for me.
I'd love to cover more. Luke, have you played in Ireland?
I have, yeah. I was over in August actually, up in Loughmacrory, and I've played.
Nice.
I was at the 2012 Worlds before.
Daniel, have you played in Ireland?
Oh, you already know the answer. She's just trying to.
Shameful, isn't it?
Yeah.
We go over there like 4 times a year, and he's never come back. But
that's true.
No,
I do have it.
The US
I have to go.
and Canada and Ireland. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ireland, Australia, United States, Mexico, England covered so far. How many have you covered in Europe, Luke?
I'm just trying to count. So I've done France, Italy, Spain, Holland, Belgium, Ireland. I think that's probably it for the minute. And then the US, Colombia. We walked across the border into Ecuador, so it's sort of handball related. 7 or 8, I think. Before
we finish up, thanks again for this. It's been a fascinating chat with everyone. Every guest we're having on, we're sort of asking them for a couple of tips to give for young people. So I suppose I'm going to ask each of you to give 2 tips. One is for what young people can do today or tomorrow during lockdown, maybe if they can't get into their local handball court, what can they be doing to improve? And the other is, hopefully a couple of months down the line when the courts open up, what do you think they should be working on? What are the tips that you give to young people to improve their game? So start off with you, Daniel, on that one.
Okay. Well, I guess right now that, maybe if they don't have access to a court, maybe try to play a different code of handball. Maybe if it's outdoor or something that you've never played, but it's still a discipline of handball, I would say, get out there and try it. Maybe you'll really like it. And when we get access, or when you guys get access to courts, I guess some people really worry about if they have small handball communities in their town or something. They worry about not having people that are of their level. But I feel like you can practice against anybody. It doesn't matter what level they are. Everybody you play, you can practice one shot, or there's something new. And especially, if it's someone that you haven't played, because it's always different. Everyone has different shots. Everyone has a different, strategy. So I'm going to tag along another tip with that is travel as much as you can and play different people.
Okay, cool. And Catriona, same to you.
Yeah, so I think at the moment now, while we can't get on the court, there are so many videos available online of top players that we can all learn from, and even just try to focus on 1 or 2 things each time, like what these players seem to have in common, like how do they serve, how do they return the serve, even just watch their movement. I even find sometimes mute it, you can concentrate better on what's going on rather than like listening to the commentary. No offense to any commentators. But yeah, like that can just kind of keep your mental game in check and even grow during this time. It might even be a good opportunity, because sometimes if we're just playing day in, day out, we just do the same things over and over again. It's like nearly on autopilot. So this is a good chance for us to all like hit the refresh button. And I suppose then when we are back playing, I would have always been a big advocate of spending time on the court by yourself. So even throwing the ball to get the different strokes, and then obviously a lot of repetition, but yeah, and skipping was another big one for me when I was younger. Like, you know, it just covers all bases, like your footwork, your fitness levels, and yeah, I'd highly recommend it.
Okay, and the same question to you, Luke.
I think Catriona's approach would have been very, very similar to mine, actually. But I think this is the perfect time to do some analysis on your own game. I mean, if you've got any videos of yourself playing, then watch them back. But even if not, just try to spend this time understanding yourself as an athlete. It's one of the things that whenever I coach young people, I always try to get them to reflect on is, if you get angry about losing, what is it within you that's driving those emotions? What is it exactly you're getting angry about, you're working up about? Or if you're oh, it doesn't matter, it's only a game type attitude, what is it that's driving that? Like, the more you can understand yourself as an athlete, the more that when you get into those pressure situations, when the games come around, you'll be able to handle it, you'll be able to control it. And then the other one is, yeah, when you can get back onto court, having done some analysis on what you need to work on, then nothing beats time spent practicing, whether that's on your own, whether that's against other people. Just understand what you need to do to make yourself a better player and get on with it.
Okay, so there you have it. Any young people watching this now, they can't say they haven't been well advised by some of the top players from the UK, the United States and Ireland. So, excuse me. I just want to say thanks again to Luke, Catriona and Daniel for giving up your time and expertise. It's fascinating to talk to you and to hear about all your travels and all the various handball communities that you've encountered around the world. I wish you the very best of luck when competition resumes again.
Cheers, Paul.
Thank you so much.